Now, coming to tonight's session, please allow me to welcome Satya Natarajan, the moderator of this session. Satya has won the GMHA Best Humanitarian Award and I Volunteer Hero Award finalist in 2017. His contributions to India's Swachh missions are covered in Forbes India magazine and TEDx show. On the professional side, he has 25 years of IT experience as Director of Technical Support Customer Success. With his experience as a co-founder, pre-sales and outbound marketer of environment startup, Satya has delivered new software product introductions in PLM and IoT domains. He is a proud alumni of the Institute pursuing the EMBA program in product leadership. A very warm welcome to you, Satya. Handing the session over to you.
Thanks, Shama. It's quite a good evening. We have an interesting line of keynote speakers, and welcome everyone to the Data Analytics and AI edition of Institute of Product Leadership. Today, we have an interesting subject as well as an interesting person trying to deliver the need of the hour. We have all talked and heard about continuous improvement in the business environment, in personal environment. So we are moving from a continuous improvement era to a continuous disruption era. And the scale and the velocity with which problems are solved, AI plays a very important role. So how does the new normal of careers look like when AI is going to catch up faster than what we as professionals could see for ourselves? So here we have Mr. Pankaj Rai, the Group Chief Data Analytics Officer at Aditya Birla Group. He's going to cover defining career strategy in an AI embedded future. Let me briefly spend a moment about his experience. In this role, as a Chief Data Analytics Officer at Aditya Birla, he leads the group's strategy on analytics, data science, enabling it for a variety of business ranging from cement, chemicals, metals, to fashion, retail, and financial services in enhancing their decision-making capabilities using data science. He also enables the analytics maturity journey of the business by creating digital products and platforms that can be scaled across the group. Before this, Pankaj had worked as a Senior Vice President Strategy at Wells Fargo. His key initiatives including establishing the digital capabilities to enable banks' digital channels and building an internal consulting team to drive global programs. He also worked as a Director of Analytics at Dell, leading business research, analysis, statistical modeling across domains like marketing, strategy, pricing, online supply chain, and financial services. Prior to that, he headed the Program Management Office at Standard Chartered Bank in their Singapore regional office, where he helped grow shared services centers across India and Malaysia. So he has almost covered it right from strategy to execution. In his professional career spanning 25 years, started as a management consultant and then went on to work with financial industries like ICICI and GE Capital in a variety of roles covering sales, risk management, Six Sigma, and operations. He holds a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from IIT and an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad. In his free time, you can hear out his videos where he talks about JOMO, run versions. Those are interesting topics in the way he sees the life in terms of a professional work-life balance. He enjoys long distance running, cycling, badminton, and meeting people in his favorite cafe. Today, he is out here to provide insights as to how we all fit into the scheme of an AI embedded future and how does our career strategy should or could look like. Over to you, Pankaj.
Thank you so much, Satya. So great to be here. And I hope I'm audible and visible properly, Satya?
Yes.
Okay, great. And Satya, I always enjoy doing data analysis of my own life through some of these sessions, because often when I analyze that life, which I'm going to do now, there are some new insight that I myself gather from the past data in my own life. So it is more like a live session of data analysis of my own, which is what I think the topic is. So what I'll do today, Satya, in the next maybe 20 odd minutes, is share some data of my life story, my life journey, try to draw some inferences, some insights, the way I looked at it. Like I always say, the data doesn't tell you anything. You have to, figure out what it means to you. So I'll share my perspective, but different people can take out different, takeaways from those experiences. And lastly, I'll talk a bit about a framework that tried to create for my daughter when I was asked the question that what should she do in the future. So that kind of falls in the area of predictive modeling that all of us try to do these days. So let me do some descriptive and diagnostic, and then get on to predictive in this talk using my own live data. So here goes, my story, so to say. I think the story began long ago when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. That's the day I was born. A day before, Mrs. Gandhi had also nationalized all our banks. So it's a pretty rememberable day for all of us, international and national events. I grew up initially in a small factory town.
Pankaj, we aren't able to hear you. Your phone is on mute.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry,
thanks.
sir. That looks like, I think, yeah. So let me begin. I think I was talking about my life story, which began back when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, and a day before Mrs. Gandhi had nationalized all our banks. So pretty memorable day for both national and international events. In the initial 8-9 years, I grew up in a town called Gorakhpur, where my dad used to work in a fertilizer factory. And we moved to Delhi post that, where I spent close to 25 years. I briefly spent some time in Chennai, 6 months, a year in Singapore, last 16 years in Bangalore. So that's the pie chart of my geographical journey, where Delhi occupies the largest, and for now, Bangalore is the next. But I always say, based on a weighted average, I think I'm a Bangalorean now when I'm asked the question, which place do you belong to? I think the other piece to take away is that all of us, I think, Satya, I think I include you in that generation. We all were kind of liberalization, post-liberalization generation. I think back in '91, the world got liberalized. I think all of us saw benefits of that liberalization, global trade. World became flat. Things were quite heady from a GDP growth rate perspective, opportunity perspective, all of that. So I also think that we were a fortunate generation to have come into the workforce, and I came into the workforce back in '93, which was just 2 years after the liberalization of our country. And I would say globalization was anyway a general thing. So I think it's important to note that the context in which my life journey has played out. So I think to kind of give some more insights into how my life was shaped, it's very important when you look back to remember your parents and your family and how that shaped you. And sometimes initially we don't realize, but in my case, let me share that story. So my dad actually grew up in a very small remote village in Uttar Pradesh, and he landed up in IIT Bombay, knowing only one language, Bhojpuri, and he learned Hindi and English both in Bombay. I think he was probably the only kid in his IIT class who did not even know Hindi, let alone English. So he, of course, as you can make out, would have been a pretty driven person. And therefore, that translated into, later on, he kind of focusing on me and my younger brother by 2 years to say that the best thing that can happen to you guys is to go to IIT, because I think he had seen IIT do wonders for his life and career, and he felt that that's what his children should do. I think not very different from a lot of parents who believe that their children should follow the same path as they had. So we were told from a very young age that you will land up in IIT. And frankly, he would spend a lot of time teaching me and my brother maths and science and all of that. He would spend his time after office, and he made sure that we kind of went into that college. And after that, he left both of us alone. In my case, what happened subsequently was that people used to go abroad to do masters, and I did the same. I took GRE exam. I started writing statement of purpose, which is a prerequisite to applying abroad. And once I wrote a statement of purpose, I realized that I did not really have major interest in bachelor's of electrical engineering, let alone masters. So I gave up, applying because I didn't think that was the next step. And then what do you do? I think most people were also applying for business school, MBA colleges. So I did that because it seemed like a nice next step to do, and I got admission into IIM Ahmedabad, and that was also quite a lucky event, because those days and even now, group discussion is a major part of the selection process. And I was pretty quiet and shy, and I could just never speak in group discussion. So I didn't get selected anywhere. But Ahmedabad, they said that all of you get 2 or 3 minutes to talk on this topic. And since I got some time to speak, I think I must have scored some marks in that group discussion round. And therefore, that is the only admission I had. I had no other option than to go there. And therefore, I went there. Not that MBA was a great experience or I loved it. It was just an escape from doing masters in electrical engineering. And after that, since there was no other escape, what do? Companies come to campus, they select you, and you join the one that you get to. And the company that I joined was a company called Feedback Ventures, a consulting company, which came on day 4. And there were seniors of ours who had worked there. Consulting was not a big phenomena back then. But then some of the seniors said, hey, this is nice. You learn about businesses, you advise people, great career, all that. So I joined, great experience, 2 years. And then I felt that I wasn't really learning anything. I was just advising people without having any experience of my own, which is when my friend Atul in ICICI invited me to talk to folks in ICICI. My Sandeep Bakshi, who happens to be the MD of the bank now, was the interviewer. They selected me. I spent the next 4 or 5 years in ICICI. I again think that was probably the best learning experience, because when you give money to people, you learn a lot. So I did learn a lot about Indian businesses, founders, different industries, how lending works, all of those types of things. And ICICI in those days, it was a project finance company, not the bank that it is now. It wasn't a great paymaster, and a lot of people would go from ICICI and work from foreign banks for broader exposure and more money. And people would go to Peregrine or Citibank or HSBC or GE and all of that. And that's what happened to me. Some of my friends had moved to G Capital. Someone invited me to talk to folks over there. They selected me. I spent the next 4 or 5 years there. GE had also gotten into this whole offshoring area, Jackets, which became Jetpack. I happened to work on a project to create that external business model, which attracted me to that whole offshoring area. Someone introduced me to another GE person who had gone to Standard Chartered, a gentleman by the name of Romi Malhotra, who was setting up the center, and he said, why don't you come and join Standard Chartered and help me set this up. So I joined, sort of left banking and joined Standard Chartered in Chennai, and then briefly in Singapore. And then Romi had come back to Bangalore to Dell, and he said, why don't you come to Dell? We are setting up a new center, and I joined Dell thanks to him. He left. There was someone else over there who said, why don't you try and do data analytics? We are trying to set up a Dell Financial Services Analytics team in Dell. And I said, yeah, that sounds interesting. I've done some finance and banking. I could certainly do analytics. I went in there back in 2007. And then I ended up spending the next 9 years in Dell, because analytics became a very booming industry. And also within Dell, the need for analytics grew, and everyone wanted to do analytics. And I therefore spent some time developing that capability within Dell across various different domains beyond financial services, which is what I had originally started with. And then again, some folks from Dell had moved to Wells Fargo, and they said, hey, Wells Fargo is now setting up, and you work in bank, invite you to come here, and I landed there. And the same story repeated in the Aditya Birla group. Friend of mine who was my predecessor, he said, hey, you've been working all this in different areas. Indian group, trying to do a lot of things. And he was moving out. He was going back to the US. And he said, why don't you come? And I went. So I think the lesson that I want to draw out from my career journey is, as is probably apparent through this story, that most of the career moves were made initially, more by elimination, because like I said, the education, my dad said, you should do this. I didn't like master's, so I did MBA, and then I did consulting, all of that. But later on, most of the moves were made because there were some friends of mine in the target company who said, looks like this might be good for you as a next career step. And I followed their advice. And that has been the common strain. I remember back in the day when people would ask me, how do you see yourself 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And I didn't really have a good answer, because I didn't have a longer term view. I did think that I should create value, I should make an impact, I should enjoy myself. But I didn't necessarily have a very strong passion towards any industry or any function or anything of that matter. And things, one led to another. And my career is made initially thanks to my dad's decision making, and later on through my friends' decision making. So I tell people that, frankly, I haven't used much data analytics, let alone actually, I haven't even done much decision making. Most of the decisions in my life were taken by my dad and my friends. In some ways, I can say that my marriage, arranged marriage that it was, that's how these things happen. You meet someone. I met my wife. I said, people said, anything wrong in her? And said, no, not at all. So then you get married. So it wasn't as if, you fall in love and you have a long dating and things of that nature. you think there is nothing wrong, so it's more of a downside protection rather than a upside passion that leads to, I would say, the arranged marriage decision. So that's sort of my own reflection on my life, that very little decision making, and very little that it was certainly not based on any data. So I keep jokingly tell my friends that while my job seems to entail helping people take better decisions using data, I doubt I have taken any meaningful decision in my life first, and whether any of the data was used at all. So that's more of a personal reflection on how the big decisions in life have been taken so far. I think Satya spoke about my interest and my passion for the outdoor and so on and so forth. So on the family side, I have two daughters. The older one is working in a company called Epsilon. The younger one has just joined Korea University, and my wife is an artist. Dad retired and lives in Noida, and he likes to read the scriptures in Sanskrit, Mahabharata, Ramayana, Gita, and talk about it to his friends and so on. So that's sort of just to complete my life story. But I think the second part of my story is about what happened 4 years ago when my older daughter Pragya was going to college, and she was studying in school. And interestingly, her decision to take science was also driven by my dad, who felt that if you're good in studies, you should take science. So, but she did not like engineering and medicine, so she took economics because she said, okay, I take science, but I don't want to do this. So she had taken economics, and then she got admission to Christ College to do economics, maths, and statistics. So, so my wife said, now you should advise her on what she should do, how she should build her career. So I said, I don't know. I never had any learning of my own on what subjects to pursue or what to do. But let me try and reflect on my own lessons and try to project in the future. Now we are getting into the prediction area. So I said, let me try and predict what the next 20, 30 years is going to look like. And therefore, what should Pragya do in that context of the future, which is emerging in front of us? And I said, let me try and make a framework out of it. I'm an MBA, so MBAs are known to make frameworks. But I'm also an engineer. So I actually wanted to derive that framework and not just say that here's the 4P framework to drive product promotion or whatever. I said, let me try and derive based on some first principles. So the way I looked at it, this was 4 years ago, is that let me look at the mega trends that are happening, what's going to happen in future. And I also said that let me look at the economic principles of supply and demand, because she was going to study economics. So let's say, what is going to be in short supply and high demand in future, and what would those characteristics be? And if you could acquire those, hopefully you should be good, because that's what economics tells us, that if you acquire things which are in high demand and short supply, that's good for you. So that was the idea. So let me share with you the 3 mega trends that I looked at, and based on that determined what is going to be in short supply. So the first trend that I had seen in my life was globalization. The world was globalizing, free trade, all of us were benefiting. We had lovely jobs, we got promotion, we got good pay, all of those types of things. And in the way I project that trend now, and I think some of you might agree as you see some of the situations world over, that the future, I think, belongs to deglobalization. The reason I say that is, I think globalization created a lot of value, a lot of rich people got created, but I think a lot of people did not benefit from all. So I think the inequality has increased. You look at the US, a lot of factory jobs are gone. People are doing, low-end retail jobs. Even in India, while there are a lot of rich people, but many people, haven't gotten out of poverty and so forth. So I think that whole inequality is being seized world over by the politicians to say, we will help the poor. I think the rich have become too rich. We need to sort of fix this. And the easiest sort of way which can be sold to the population is to say, we will stop immigration. We will do this for you, and we will not allow others to come and take your job, all of that. So I think the future belongs to deglobalization, where a lot of people will look inwards, countries, maybe companies, and even people, and all of that. So therefore, I think there'll be a short supply of what I think, what I will call compassion, which is thinking about others, knowing about other people, incorporating their ideas and thoughts into our thought process. So I think compassion to me will be in short supply, because everyone will become very selfish. Now you can ask me the question that, while that is true, why would you think that it should be in high demand? Yeah, it would be in short supply, but why should it be in high demand? And my reason for that comes from the fact that all the large global problems today can only be solved through collaboration. And collaboration doesn't happen if you don't have compassion. Whether you talk about global warming, which is environment, whether it is about terrorism, or money laundering, or any of those big problems that we see today. It is very hard to solve any of those big problems without collaboration globally. And therefore, I think even in the private sector, when we see folks like Amazon and others, it's all about ecosystem. No one is able to do things on their own. People are forming partnerships and ecosystem and collaboration. So I think the future belongs to collaboration, which I think emanates from compassion. But I think the world is moving in the other way. So an individual or an organization which is compassionate, I think will hopefully win in the long run, because that's what, to me, the basic economic principle tells me. I think the second mega trend, and I think Satya also briefly touched upon it, is related to the world being very linear and earlier, and now suddenly the world has become quite non-linear and quite disruptive. So I think the continuous improvement paradigm that some of us lived in the past is not relevant anymore. I think we have to be more creative. So creativity, I think, is the main way for us to go forward. We have to continue to reinvent ourselves, rethink ourselves, and so forth. And creativity, I think, is in short supply, because a lot of us have imagined a linear world and felt that if we continue to just be better than the other guy, it will work out. But we have so many examples that while Toyota, through continuous improvement, beat Ford and General Motor, Tesla came along and said, that's not the way it works. It's a non-linear world, and Amazon is a great example of that. So I think the creativity is another sort of seed, which I think it is likely to be in short supply and high demand the way the world is evolving. The other one I look at is the number of choices that we have had. Some of us had very few choices. We were, Colgate or Forhands, Fiat or Ambassador, engineer or doctor. You had very little choices. You either chose one, or you did not get the other one, or you did not like something, and you were quite grateful for whatever you did. I was quite grateful to be an engineer, be an MBA, get married, and whatever all things that came my way. I had very few choices. Some of them just were the single choice that I had. I was quite happy. Now, when I see everyone has hundreds of choices, there's so many options and phone that everyone is confused whether you are buying something or any other decision. So I think in that, abundance-oriented world versus the scarcity-oriented world that I lived in, I think the problem of decision-making becomes very hard. People try to look for trends where there is none, because there is no way for you to do that. So I think the other C that I think is in short supply is conviction, which is belief in yourself. Because I think the answers to today's choices will not be derived from external trends, which was possible in a linear world. I think they have to come from the inside, our own belief in ourselves, on what we like, what we enjoy, versus what the trend outside is. So I think I see conviction or belief in yourself as a major important characteristics, which I think will be in short supply, because people are used to following external trends to take decisions on their life and career. But that will break down because of hundreds of choices and hundreds of options continuously evolving, and they will not give the right answer. And therefore, coming from the inside on what you really believe in and what you really like is where the answer is. But we haven't been trained for that, and everyone else is also telling you what to look at, and outside data will not give those answers. So I think these three C's, the way I look at it, was compassion, which should ideally lead to a conviction of where you want to play. And then creativity, playing creatively, were the three C's that I felt were the mega trends based on supply and demand which are there, and I shared with my daughter, my wife, and everyone, and they felt happy. But a couple of years later, I checked again, and she had forgotten these three C's, and I felt I think this framework is incomplete. While they are all right, but I think there is more to it. So I added two more C's, one at the beginning of these three C's and one at the end. So the first C to my mind was curiosity. That if you don't have any curiosity, there is no compassion, there is no conviction, there is no creativity. And even if you have all of these things, and if you have been creative and you've done things very well, I think you need to communicate, which was the fifth C, which I added. So I said, here is this 5C framework in my mind, which kind of derives from the experiences that I have seen and the way I have looked at the data going forward, to say that, if you are looking forward to what to do or how to think about the future, I would feel that think of it as a circle of the 5 C's, starting with curiosity, which should lead to compassion, which is knowing about everyone and everything and so on and so forth. And that compassion should lead to a conviction of where do I want to play, knowing what I know. And that conviction should lead to some amount of creativity on how you play, because the creativity is both in the defining the problem and also solving the problem. Traditionally, people have looked at creativity only as a solutioning approach. I think creativity is also in finding the right problem. That's what solving. And the last one is about then communicating what you did and how you did, because that communication will hopefully provide feedback that will again arouse the curiosity, and that 5C framework gets complete. So this was the 5C that was created a couple of years after the first 3Cs came about. And then I shared this with a lot of people, my friends, folks in office and all of that. And then a lot of people said, hey, these 5Cs are not just relevant for Pragya. They are relevant for you and me and everyone else, because all of us are facing the same world, the same trends. And why should it just be the young people who should think about it in that way? Everyone else should. In fact, you could argue that folks like us who have grown in a very different era, it will be harder for us to come to these 5Cs. Maybe for some of the younger ones, these 5Cs might come naturally. So that's what I would say, that I want to leave you all with that thought process. That's my prediction or my predictive modeling. That I believe that folks who acquire this 5C type of a thought process, I think will be better off versus those who don't, based on what my experience and what my thing is. So Satya, I'll kind of pause here and maybe let you ask some questions, because I know when we spoke earlier, you had so many questions, and I thought maybe this is the time to sort of get there now.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks a lot, Pankaj, because I almost kind of lost track of time because hearing how you said right from the time where decisions were made on behalf of you, and you had to take depending on your friends and father. And it is in no way different than what AI would make it now for us. So I don't see any difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
So most of the AI decisions will be taken by AI, and recommendations will be done on e-commerce websites and so on.
Yeah.
So I don't feel lost now. It gives a lot of conviction that we have a future. So coming from there, I had prepared few questions. So I would call the first question as a teaser question. So I just wanted to have it a little lighter. And then we go into the complex areas of skills versus knowledge and so on. And also I see some questions online coming up, which were very practical questions built in reality also. So I'll take one at a time.
Yeah.
So are you able to hear me?
Yeah. I can hear you very well.
Okay. So be it machines or artificial intelligence in the form of softwares, nowadays are picking up senses like hearing, seeing, suggesting. Except for tasting, almost every sense is kind of operationalized using AI right now. And we have also seen AI is able to learn and problem solve, and even in certain circumstances beat champions in chess games, etc. So my question in a humorous fashion is that, is there something really called as AI sense?
This is a fascinating area, and so many smart people are talking about it, and people have formed opinions. The most famous one is, I think, Ray Kurzweil and others, who believe in the singularity, where they think machine intelligence will surpass human intelligence, so on. I think the one thing, at least, that I believe in, and I think this is also something that the inventor of the microprocessor also has done. And what he said was, and he's the guy who invented the microprocessor back in 1969, I think 15 years ago, and he used to work for Intel for all his life, and then he retired. And he said that he started thinking about future of machines, and we all talk about intelligent machines. And he said, beyond intelligence, there's something called consciousness. So what might a conscious machine look like is the question I think he posed to himself. And by the way, there is a lot of material on the web, and those who are interested can go and look at Federico Fermi on what he said and what he's thinking. He has established a foundation, I think, called the Infinity Foundation or something. And there's a lot of material there. And I think he hasn't found the answer yet. But I think a few things that he has found, which I found very fascinating, which I wanted to share with the audience here, is that he basically said that, how do you bring consciousness into machine, and how do you even think about a conscious machine and so on. And he said today, all our machines are, operating at a very, more at the intelligence level, not at the conscious level. And the way he described it, he said, if you just look at science, the way it has progressed, we used to have Newtonian science, which was in the real world, balls falling and laws of motion and so on. Then came quantum mechanics. We went into the inner world of the atom and we started to define it. He thinks that the third wave of science, which is science 3.0, if I can paraphrase what he believes, would be getting into the minds of the people, into our own consciousness. So this is, now you're bringing spirituality into science. And he says, we are also all human beings are doing experiments in our mind. That's what science is all about, experiments. Unfortunately, the experiments in science 3.0 will be individual experiments done in people's mind and not repeatable experiments done in the outside world or in the atomic world and so on. And he thinks that we are not there yet, but science one day will advance to include the inner conscious world of human beings. And that is when conscious machine will be possible. And I don't think he has a timeline on when that is going to happen. And I also believe that while we talk about machines in solving problems, even now, if you think about it, the real value is created in figuring out what problem is worth solving, defining the problem. And today, it's very hard for any of us to understand how a machine will determine what problem is worth solving. And will we believe the machine in solving that? So I think we all like machines to be our servant, to use a to say, if we have a problem, they can solve it for us. But will we want them to define the problems for us and dictate our life? Is quite unlikely. And therefore, I think that AI and narrow AI and all of those are great. But AGI and the general AI is something that I don't know what it is and when and whether it will be there. And even if it is a desirable thing or not. So I would say I will leave it at that.
Sure. So we still get to ask questions. That's the simplicity.
Absolutely. And we all love to ask questions.
Yes. And ask the right questions. So that's a great unique sense that we would still continue to have in this AI embedded future. So moving on to a real world question in terms of how does a new normal of a career look like in an AI embedded future? Like traditionally we do engineering, we do experience, and then we become more experienced and mature. How does the AI career map look to you?
Yeah, and I try to summarize all my thoughts by way of frameworks. So for this question, I have a 3P framework, just like the 5C framework earlier. And the 3P really again derives from it is a part of this larger thing that we all were subservient to process. So the first P was process. I was a Six Sigma guy. I would improve processes, and process was king because the life was linear and simple and moved slowly. So process, if you could master, you could get ahead. I think then came product. And I think, IPL, all of you represent product because you said, hey, process is passe. We are all product people. We will devise products and they will solve all our problems. And that is, the process is there, but process is, subservient to the products. And so we came into this product world. I think we have to now elevate ourselves into the third P, not that process and product will disappear. I think they will continue to change. But I think the third P, which can be our anchor, which I call the purpose. So to me, purpose, or what do you want to do and where do you want to play, where is your conviction, is where we should land. Because what we need is something to hang on to, something that we can push and pursue and be passionate about. And I think purpose, or what you're trying to do, is where I think we could anchor. And then the product to solve that purpose, or the process required, can continue to change and evolve, because those things are going to keep evolving all the time. So that's how I look at the career of people, to say, you can either be in today's digital world, a business guy or an engineering guy. So make that choice. If you're a business guy, then you become the product leader, product owner. If you're the engineering guy, then you become an engineer person. I think if I were to simplify, there are only two roles: a product role or a engineering role. And I think over time, people will be able to figure out which ones is that they enjoy doing. So either you learn the business and drive the product and the roadmap, or you're an engineering person who drive the technology side of it. And I think people can determine, which one works for them. And maybe they can do both, because I think in the future, it will be a process of continuous learning, continuous reinvention. And the way we have defined careers in the past of engineer or doctor or data science or whatever will disappear, because I think those taxonomies will keep reinventing themselves. So I would think that I would hang on to some kind of a belief or a purpose that I want to go after, and everything else I need to learn. Gone are the days when I said, oh, I've learned these skills, and people would come to you an interview and say, I've learned this skill, I want to deploy it. And someone will say, hey, just because you learned it, I'm not going to give you an opportunity to deploy it. You look at what I'm trying to do, and if you can solve my purpose, then come over. And if that requires you to learn, be my guest. I think that's the approach we need to have in the future.
Okay, that's well said. Ask the larger purpose of question and then get guided. That's a very good way to look at it. Now we will take some questions which have come online and on chat. There is one question from Praveen Jesudas. This question goes, as a part of your current role, what are all the sets of skills, capabilities you have found to be most useful?
Yeah. So, in the just to describe my current role is to create a culture of, database decision making within, all our companies and so forth. So we are leveraging, 3 levers might I say four levers to make that happen. And I can describe that, and you'll know what those capabilities are. So the first lever is just purely what we call analytical consulting. Hey, you have a problem in logistics, marketing, sales, whatever. We can come to you. We can understand your problem and even sometimes redefine your problem and then help solve that using data, because that's what our skill set is. So analytics consulting is one where you are appreciating the business, understanding the business, using data to help solve the problem. The second one that we are doing is to bring in some engineering skills to say, when we have solved this problem, can we make a product out of it? And we can even give it to you and say, hey, you know what, we've solved it. It is now productized. Here's the data pipe. Here's how it comes from. You can, use it on your own and you can do it yourself. So there's an engineering skill to productize some of those solutions that we have done. The third is we are also training those people in data science skills, initially basic and maybe later on more, to say, to be able to do some of these things, we need to train you. So we have a learning sort of pillar, which is the third pillar to enable this thing. And the fourth one is really bringing the outside ecosystem, especially startups. They think, hey, you want to solve this problem. We don't have to do everything ourselves. Here's the startup, and along with us, we can solve that problem. So there are these 4 types of skilled people in these 4 pillars. The analytical consulting people, very business focused. I know logistics, or I know cement, or I know marketing. I will solve a problem in that domain using data science. Engineering, I know how the data lake works. I will figure out the right software. I will figure out a framework to make sure that your product is really, serve the purpose, and it keeps evolving as your needs change. So that's the engineering type of talent where you have folks with that type of skill. Third, the person who's bringing in the startup has a bit of a what should I say, exposure to understanding the startup ecosystem, understanding their technology, and trying to see how can that be brought in to bear into our product roadmap. And the last one, like I said, is more of a training and learning to say what type of trainings and learning programs can help our people become better. So those are the 4 skill sets we have in our team. I would say that the larger skill sets are the first 2, which is the analytical consulting and the engineering. The training and the startup part are really small. We have very few people that need to do that. And I think people can determine how they want to shape their career. And I would think that they can move from one to the other. You don't have to just choose one and remain with that.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Pankaj, again. So we have 2 more questions. In the interest of time, we will go and take these 2 questions and see how it comes up. Vijay asks, particularly related to your finding the higher purpose in an AI embedded feature. In the context of that, he asks a question: how to convince new companies about career transition and communicate effectively to get job that I enjoy and we believe the same opportunity not supported or available in the current organization.
Yeah, I think many a times I hear this term about I want a big data job, or I want an AI job, or sometimes I hear people saying I'm a AI person or an AI led company and all of that. I have firmly believed that those are all means to an end. They are tools to solve a problem. I think I used to have this slide when I used to work for Dell in my presentations when I used to talk to people, and it used to say no one wants big data, and big data was a big deal those days, but everyone wants big results. And I would say Michael Dell. Now I don't know whether Michael Dell said that or not. No one ever asked him. But that used to be a standard slide in our presentation to basically emphasize to people that, your tools and your techniques and all of that, unless they are delivering results, unless you are creating business value, they are not, they are worthwhile. So I would always say that if you can, do it on a calculator or do it on mental math, You don't have to use a SQL query to do that. So figure out and focus on the outcome, and then figure out what is required to get to that outcome, which is again, you can in one way say it is a purpose-driven thing. So I think if all of us start to understand the business, figure out the dynamics there, then say, hey, you know what, I can create value in the business in this way. And by the way, I have the tools and techniques to do that. I think when we go into a career tools first or knowledge first, I think sometimes we run into problem because the user does not understand how to use our knowledge or our tools. They understand their business, they understand their problem. And if he goes, oh, I'm an AI expert, I want to work for you. And he said, oh, I don't know what to do with an AI expert. But if you were to tell me that you will improve my sales or you will improve my supply chain or whatever. So I would think that all of us who are enablers need to really understand the business very well, because only when we understand and empathize and become compassionate with that, so our curiosity to become compassionate will deal the conviction and the creativity and the communication that I speak about to deliver in our job. So I would go back to my 5C to say, think in those terms. I think you will find the answer.
Sure. So it's basically using all the 5Cs, where just big data is not just sufficient, but big results are also the key drivers towards any skill that we want to kind of, take towards.
Yeah, I would say that, make it simple. Let's say you are talking to a marketing person. So you are curious. You have to first understand what they are doing, how they do. And through that curiosity, you appreciate and you understand. And then you come up with some creative questions and creative answers. And then you communicate. And that's what everyone wants. So I think we have to spend a lot more time with the business and the users to understand and then see how we can bring our skills to bear. And sometimes maybe we have to acquire new skills because the way that problem needs to be solved, whatever we have learned so far doesn't work. So I think we have to move away from our learning, which has to be treated as a sunk cost, versus in the past when, I would say, oh, I'm an engineer and an MBA and I'll apply whatever I learned. Today, they will say, maybe you didn't learn all of the things that are required. So you need to learn something else. So I think, again, outside in, focus on the result, focus on the problem, purpose, whatever, then figure out what is needed. And you don't have to know everything yourself. You can form the ecosystem. Like I said, world belongs to ecosystem. If you are a good product person, get an engineering person if that's what is needed, get something else if that's what is needed. So therefore, we have to focus on the outcome and the impact.
Sure. So that's well said. Some of the principles or first principles look constant across generation. It's just the flavor that
Yes,
gets
absolutely.
added. So good. So I think we have another. We can take up another 2 questions. So we will take one which came online from Parthasarathi Sri Krishna, if I'm pronouncing it right. So particularly in the context of mid-career transitions and people who belong to past with different skills, all of a sudden sees this future of AI kind of coming and taking them by storm. They don't even have time to kind of look at it, unlike new generations who are well-bred from AI as their learning process. So the question is, how to convince new companies about career transitions and communicate effectively to get the job I enjoy when we believe the same opportunity are not supported or available in the current organization. I mean, just to give it more, I think that's one we addressed it. Sorry for that. Parthasarathi asks a question, kids are our future. How do you think 5 C's can be inculcated in them?
Yeah. And I'll briefly, touch upon the previous one also. I think we should not try to convince anyone about anything. I think if we are convinced ourselves on how we create value, then I think we will find the right opportunity, if not in the same company, in some other company. So I always think that it's very, difficult to convince people. But if we are convinced about ourselves, if we are able to make an impact in our own way, then the right type of opportunities will come to us. So I always look at that Amir Khan movie that you do the right thing, then kamyabi tumhare piche bhagegi. So let people chase you versus, you chasing something and trying to convince someone who's not interested in getting convinced. So I think there are so many opportunities and so many different things happening around us, and not necessarily all in large companies. They're happening in garages, they're happening here. So I would think that people should probably be open to trying out new things in new areas with new people versus trying to, fit into that large organization culture, which all of us have been trained to, that, join a large company and, just work there. So I do think that we can find our own path in many different ways and not necessarily try to convince someone if they're not getting convinced. About the children, I think that children, just learn from us. We don't have to tell them anything. Even if we tell them something, they will still copy what we do. So at least I have two older daughters, 22 and 18. And what I have learned is that they will just absorb what they see around them. You can tell them anything, but they'll still absorb that. So I do think that if we be the role models, I think that's enough. I think if we can follow what we really believe in, they don't need to be convinced about that. And we have to be comfortable in our own skin and believe in that. And I think they will follow, or get them exposed to other individuals in the family or friends or others who follow those values and beliefs. So I just think that the company that you keep does shape you. So I think if we can just be that role model and engage with such people, and hopefully they don't get into bad company. That's what I think of.
Sure. So I think those were the three questions that came online. The last question was from Parthasarathi Sri Krishna. I will take one more question that came in early. Is there anything that you would suggest for people from a non-STEM background while they look at career options in AI?
Yeah. So, I was talking about defining the problem, determining what needs to be done. I think that comes not from AI. That comes from philosophy. That comes from history. That comes from psychology. It comes from sociology. So I think what is worth pursuing? I mean, if you were to ask that question in this world, what is worth pursuing? I don't think science answers that question very well. Science is a good one to answer technical questions or finding technical solutions. But the larger questions of life and even business, where should we play, how should we do, what should we do, I think a lot of our arts which are hard to code is where the answer is. So I do think today, and that's what I also tell my daughter, that while STEM and AI are great and they are good in the solutioning space, but what is worth doing will come from a study of philosophy and ethics and sociology and anthropology and other things. So I do think that there's a lot more room for human beings who have that type of a bent. And I think a lot of people have gone into the field of AI. And sometimes, again, I jokingly tell people that this whole AI revolution will actually automate everything that can be defined by an algorithm. So, by the way, frankly, we don't need so many people because the algorithm will solve everything that is worth determining. But what is worth doing is where the algorithm will not play a role. So, can you develop that skill of critical thinking, finding the right answer question, and so forth? So I do think that some of those areas will be very important. And I would expect, at least in the next 20, 30 years, the return of people seeking a liberal art combination with STEM, because STEM alone may not, I think, be the best option for everyone.
That's great. So one additional C, which is critical thinking.
Yes. Yeah.
So just to sum up, in the interest of time, we might run into more questions, but I would say mega trends which demands are not just big data, but big results. And the choices of plenty is also existing. The differentiator between an AI embedded career versus a non-embedded career is how you fare well in your curiosity index, compassion, collaboration, creativity, and communication. That sums up almost how we need to redefine whether we being a new child out of college or going through midlife crisis. So that's the kind of a overall breadth of perspectives that we could get from you. And as you rightly said, science solves certain problems, but the higher questions can be got through well beyond science. So it's a great time. And right now, I think we are done with our questions right now. And
I might want to leave just one last thought with the audience, which just occurred to me when you were describing the summary. One other sort of perspective in a similar way, which might be helpful. I think in one way, we have moved from a society of scarcity to abundance. I see that we consume two essential elements. One is food for our tummy, and one is information for our mind, right? So in the scarcity era, both of those were scarce. So we would acquire them whenever we got them because it was difficult to get. We'll eat food when we found it. We will get information when we heard it. In the abundance era, that same mental model of taking it when you get it will lead to obesity in the tummy and mental illness in the head. So I think that we need to practice a way of diet, if I can say so, to develop a mental model to say we will see both food and information when we need it and not when it presents itself. So I think this enthusiasm to go to a buffet and eat everything, or the enthusiasm to read all the 500 WhatsApp messages that come your way, has to go away, because that's the old mental model at play. In fact, I talk about the joy of missing out to say, don't seek anything till you need it. And life is pretty peaceful because everything is available at a fingertip from an information perspective and food in a buffet. And therefore, I think we need to drastically change the old mental model to deal in this abundance era where both food and information are infinite, and we need to pick and choose. Otherwise, we'll go mad and become fat.
That's well said. That's well said. So let's not create mental obesity.
Yes.
In the sense of not having something that we don't want. That's a good perspective. Thanks again, Pankaj. I'll have Shama take us through the rest of the session. But Shama, I have already picked up the question for the day. Of course, all the questions, whether it was well in advance or that came online. One thing that I kind of course, Pankaj would agree is that when he talked about for a question like as a part of the current role, what the skills and capabilities have to be more useful. He also replied saying that it's not just the big data that is needed, big results, and he spread it out over 5 or 4 different skills, right from engineering to business problem solving and so on. So probably, Pankaj, do you have a choice? If not, I'm going to pick one.
Are you saying the best question that was asked?
Yes.
You know, again, being a father of 2 daughters, I like the question of someone asking, saying, what can we do for our children? You know, I really like that question. And I think that's a question which I think every parent should continue to think about.
Sure. So that's our contribution to the next generation. And that question comes from Parthasarathi Sri Krishna. So Shama, Parthasarathi Sri Krishna will be the best question.
Great. Yes. Thank you, Satya, for announcing the winner, and thank you, Pankaj, and congratulations, Parthasarathi, for winning the Taylor Scholarship of $200. We'll get in touch with you with the reward shortly.
Thank you.
Sure. So as a mark of appreciation, sharing your valuable insight, Pankaj, when you scan the code here, it will take you to our Hall of Fame, and you continue to inspire us with your thoughts and with your 5C communication, contribution, creativity, and so on. So eagerly looking forward in the future opportunities as well. Thanks for sharing your valuable insight.
Thank you all.
I agree with Satya here. Thank you, Pankaj, for your brilliant and amazing insights. And it was a complete pleasure having you here. And like Satya said, your thoughts and amazing insights drawn from your journey and experience in the industry definitely help our audiences and us. Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you all. Thank you, Satya. Thank you, Shama. Bye-bye all.
Bye-bye. And Satya, thank you to you for facilitating the session seamlessly, like always. We are glad to have you here, and we'll keep having you in the future events. Thank you once again.
Thanks, Shama.